Good morning, you guys. I just found such a cool true story about Bronco Charlie and the Pony Express. This is a 3.4 accelerated reading level book. Here I am at school. The bells are still ringing, even though you guys are at home right now. I was pretty excited when I found this. My husband just got home from an overlanding trek, four-wheel driving through parts of all of Nevada and Utah on the Pony Express Trail. So maybe I'll share a couple pictures with you guys once I finish. But this is a true story and I love it. Sacramento Valley, California, 1860. Julius jumped onto his first bunking bronco. The wild horse leapt to the left and whirled to the right. It tried hard to shake the 10-year-old boy loose, but Julius clung to the reins until his fingers burned. Then the animal tripped. Julius tumbled to the ground. Tears filled his eyes. Julius Miller loved horses more than anything. He wanted to prove he could be a cowboy. When he was 9 years old, his father sent him to sea to become a sailor, but Julius hated the sea. He jumped ship in California. There he met a cowboy named Juan who worked at a cattle ranch. Juan took Julius back to the ranch with him. Juan was the best horse tamer there. He taught Julius to ride horses, rope cows, and hunt bears. And he was teaching Julius how to tame a wild horse. If Julius tamed this one, the animal would be his. Julius forced back tears as the sound of cowboys laughing. They thought Julius was too small to tame such a big, wild horse. But he showed them. Julius got back on the bronco and stayed on. After that, the men called him Bronco Charlie. The name stuck. Bronco Charlie tamed that first horse and many others. After a year, he started itching for a new adventure. One night, a scruffy old cowboy drifted into camp. He dazzled Charlie with stories about the new Pony Express. Pony Express riders changed how people got news. No railroad or good roads ran between Missouri and California in 1861. So California's scattered towns were cut off from the rest of the country. Express riders traveled through the desert, Rocky Mountains, and Indian country. They rode all night, changed horses at stations 15 miles apart. They took an oath to stay on time. Express riders carried mail across 2,000 miles in just 10 days. That was 20 days faster than stagecoaches and 100 days quicker than a boat. The old cowboy said that the Express used riders a little older than Charlie. Charlie dreamed of being part of the Pony Express. Next chance he had, he hightailed it from the ranch. He wanted to see the Pony Express for himself. Sacramento, California, 1861. Charlie rode into the lively mining town of Sacramento. It had one of the biggest Pony Express stations in the West. Charlie followed the dusty road to the station. As he got closer, he heard the clip-clop of galloping hooves behind him. His heart pounded. Was he about to see a Pony Express rider? Charlie turned. All he saw was a horse with a mailbag and an empty saddle. People flooded into the streets to see the riderless horse. It was a Pony Express horse for sure, but no one knew what had happened to the rider. "What you going to do now?" a woman asked the station master. "The mail will be late this time," he answered. "We'll have to wait for the next rider." Everyone grew quiet. Charlie looked at their worried faces. He saw fear for the missing rider, but he also saw hunger for news from back east. Folks in the next town would hunger for it too. That spring, war had broken out between the states in North and the South. Most Californians had family in those states. Charlie pushed to the front of the crowd. "I can ride," he said. All eyes turned to him. Some men said that Charlie looked too young. Pony Express riders handled fast, headstrong horses. Riders faced bears, wolves, and rattlesnakes, and they had to steer clear of unfriendly Indians. White settlers had taken away Indian land for many years. Some Indians fought back by attacking travelers. "If you'll give me your fighting chance, I'll show you what I can do," Charlie said. Before anyone could answer, Charlie handed his horse to a stranger, then he swung into the saddle of a waiting Pony Express horse. The station master looked around. What choice did he have? He gave Charlie a horn. He said, "The next station is in Placerville, about 50 miles away." Charlie was to blow the horn when he neared the station. The sound would tell the men to get a fresh horse ready for another rider. Then the station master shook Charlie's hand and slapped the horse on the back. Charlie was off. He followed the dirt road until he reached the mountains. Soon the town disappeared. A wide grin spread across Charlie's face. For this one day, he was a true Pony Express rider. Charlie felt so important he thought his buttons would pop. He knew the ride wouldn't be easy. There were no roads or markings to help him find the way to Placerville. He was on a horse he'd never ridden, and he had to travel up and down steep mountain passes. Already the horse slipped. Climbing the rocky slopes, Charlie patted the horse to steady him. As they came around a bend, the wind picked up. Raindrops dotted Charlie's face. Before long, sheets of blinding rain soaked his clothes. Charlie reached for the soft leather mail pouch. Oil silk sealed the pockets. He knew the letters inside would stay dry. It rained for hours. The trail became slick and muddy, and one turn the horse stepped into a small hole. Charlie slid off to check its leg. He felt no broken bones, but the horse limped. Charlie walked him for a while, then he jumped on again. He had to get to Placerville. People were counting on him. As they rounded another bend, the rain stopped. The late afternoon sun appeared for a while. A yellow glow lit the mountainside. Then blackness closed around them. Charlie shivered. He pulled his damp shirt tight. He had never been in the mountains by himself at night. He always had cowboys singing or a herd of cattle to keep him company. Every critter cry and breaking twig seemed louder in the darkness. Charlie remembered the rider whose place he had taken. What could have happened to him? Indians? Wolves? A bad fall? As the clouds cleared, the moon came out. At first, Charlie welcomed the light. Then the moon's shadows began to play tricks on him. Animals and birds looked like monsters. Tree branches seemed like grabbing arms. Suddenly, the horse leapt up in terror and spun around. Charlie tried to calm the spooked animal, but out of the corner of his eye he saw someone hiding in the trees. The man raised a huge club. He was an Indian? Was he an Indian? Charlie held his breath. He slowly pulled a knife from his belt. He was about to throw it when the wind picked up. The man moved. Charlie burst out laughing. The man was really branches and leaves. For now, Charlie was safe. After many hours more, the sun came up. Charlie stopped on a ridge overlooking a small town. It was Placerville. A Pony Express sign hung on the last cabin on the road. He rode down the only mud road into the center of town. Then he reached for his horn and blew hard. The station master raced from the cabin to saddle a fresh horse. People rushed out of doors to hear the latest news. The station master pulled the letters for Placerville from Charlie's mailbag. Then he stuffed other mail into the bag and sealed it again. A new rider grabbed the bag and jumped onto a fresh horse. The station master turned to Charlie. He had never seen such a young Pony Express rider. He asked Charlie how he came to ride. Charlie explained as best he could, but he was too tired to talk much. The man showed him a bed where he could sleep. He was tired. He said the stagecoach would take him back to Sacramento the next night. Charlie wished he could ride for the Pony Express. Charlie slept clear to the next morning and woke with rumbles in his stomach. He filled his belly with a warm meal. Then he sat at the station to wait for the stagecoach. At sundown, the blast of an express rider horn made him jump. Charlie hurried from the station to greet the rider, But something was wrong. The rider bumped from side to side, trying to stay in the saddle. Then he toppled off his horse and sagged to the ground. He said Indians had shot him about 10 miles back. Charlie knew the man couldn't deliver the mail, so Charlie picked up the mailbag, he climbed on a fresh horse, and he pointed it to Sacramento. No one tried to stop him. The station master knew he could ride as fast as any Pony Express man. This time the trip went smoother. Charlie remembered the way back. He knew the sounds of mountain animals and birds. He laughed at moonlit shadows from trees and rocks. He felt like he'd been delivering mail for years. Charlie reached Sacramento the next afternoon. He blew his horn. Then he dropped off the mailbag and horse at the station door. The station master was surprised to see Charlie on another Pony Express horse. Charlie hoped the man would hire him on the spot, but he only said that Charlie could rest in the office. Then he would have to go home. The next morning, voices woke Charlie. The men at the station had been talking. They said Charlie proved himself. He was good enough to ride the Pony Express. Did he want a job? Charlie wanted it more than anything. Charlie was sworn in at the station that day. Charlie gave his word that he would never fight, drink, or curse. And as the youngest Pony Express rider, he promised to always deliver the mail on time. Can you believe it? He was only a 10 or 11. Charlie delivered the mail for another 5 months. On October 18th, 1861, the first telegraph message was sent. Telegraph messages traveled across country through wires. Each message arrived in a flash. 8 days later, the Pony Express closed. Charlie continued to find adventures riding horses. He traveled the world with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. He tamed horses for Teddy Roosevelt, who later became a U.S. president. He protected U.S. borders as a Texas Ranger, yet he always treasured his days as a Pony Express rider. In 1931, Bronco Charlie made one last ride to deliver the mail. By then, cars had replaced horses. Some people flew by airplane. Still, Charlie wanted to travel from New York City to San Francisco by horseback. He rode 30 miles a day through snow, rain, and sandstorms. The trip took 7 months and 23 days. At age 81, Charlie was the only person ever to cross the country on a horseback. Bronco Charlie liked to thrill listeners with stories of the Pony Express and his last mail run. He knew how to spin a good tale. Sometimes he changed the facts from one telling to the next. In 1934, many of his stories went into a book. Bronco Charlie died at age 105, the longest living Pony Express rider. Years later, his great-grandniece discovered the true story of how he became the youngest rider on the Pony Express. That story lives on. The end.